Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining me. This is the morning market review. It's Tuesday, it's the 25th of July. My name is Russell Shaw. I'm a senior market specialist at FXCM. Good morning, Zanetta, and welcome back from your holiday. I hope it was terrific. Good morning, Raj. Nice to have you on the webinar as always. Kim, thank you very much for joining. Pleasure to have you on the webinar. Thank you, everyone, for signing in this morning. Just going to go ahead, bring up our disclaimers. Hey, Howard, how are you? Nice to have you on the webinar. I'm just going to keep the high risk investment warning on our screen for a few moments. All right, let's just bring up the market commentaries disclaimer. Hey, Howard, I hope that goes well. I hope that goes well for you. All right, let's just bring up our market references as well. MarketScope 2.0, tradingview.com. I think we'll do most of our work in MarketScope. I want to start off with the DAX today. So this is the main layout on MarketScope 2.0. We're looking at the DAX. We're looking at this on the weekly chart. And so I want to take a look at the potential for the DAX to attack overhead resistance. When I say overhead resistance, I'm just moving to another weekly chart here. You can see round about the 16,300, 16,400, we've got this very strong overhead resistance, which is this red horizontal. Since November, so around about mid-November 2021, we've attacked it 4 times. And each time there's been reaction back. And I think that the DAX is setting up to attack it a 5th time. And I just wonder if it's going to have the legs to overcome this overhead resistance. Now, a few things to point out here. Just the most obvious. Taking a look at the trend following indicator, which is the exponential moving average. Moving averages are trend following indicators. By and large, I would suggest we do have a trend here with the DAX, although the last 10 weeks or so has been moving sideways. But you can see that there are higher troughs followed by higher peaks. So I think that the exponential moving average is a fair indicator to look at. Well, price is above it, and that moving average is still pointing up. So that's bullish. And I think that the RSI is something to keep an eye on. The longer it stays above 50, well, that is a connotation of underlying bullish momentum. Well, the longer we stay above 50, the greater the likelihood that we tackle and overcome the overhead resistance. Where we start looking at the fine details is when we start looking at those reference candles. And I just want to go through these reference candles. I know we've talked about them a fair amount. We'll continue to talk about them because I believe that they are one of the most useful tools to have in your toolbox because they lay the foundation for swings. The problem is they don't always lead to swings. If they always led to swings, it would be easy, right? More often than not, they probably peter out. But when we do get some sort of trending movement, the reference candle becomes a very important part of our arsenal. And let's just go ahead and bring up Microsoft Paint. I want to just go over what I'm looking at. again, I think everybody knows what a reference candle is, but I'm just going to go through it. I'm going to go through the simple form and the complex form here, because it does look as if there is a complex form that's taking place on the DAX. This is the simple form, and it's really, there's three conditions. Okay, when I first started doing this in the workshops, I kept it at two conditions, but I found that the participants found it easier when we refer to three conditions. The first condition is that the lowest low, okay, that there is a lowest low in at least three candles. So we've got three candles here, and then we've got the lowest low. And then condition two would be price on the right-hand candle taking out the high of the reference. That's condition two. And then condition three is price closing above the high of the reference. If you're going to get condition three, by definition, you're going to get condition two, but we'll split it into those three conditions. So we've got the lowest low in at least three candles, price taking out the reference candles high, and then price closing above it. That's the simple variation of a bullish reference candle. We'll just do the bullish side today. Let's just do a complex. Let me show you what a complex reference candle is, where there's going to be more than three candles in the setup. And the way that typically happens is when the reference candle is quite long in range. And then what tends to happen is that the candle to the right sort of forms a inside candle in it. So we don't have conditions 2 or 3. All we've got is condition 1. So we've got to wait until we get the two conditions. So this is the complex form. And you can see here, it's the fourth candle that effectively takes out the reference candle's high and then closes above the reference candle. So that's the complexity. Let's go ahead and take a look at the DAX, and then I want to show you the oil weekly chart, which in my opinion has a really good example of a reference candle, and then we'll go back to DAX just to sort of really kind of conclude on a strong footing. So what we'll do is we'll go back to DAX. Here is the reference candle right there. Okay, there's the reference candle, and it's a complex form here. Why is it a complex form? Because the next candle is an inside period. Once you've got that inside period, it's automatically going to move from a 3 candle cluster to at least a 4. This one looks like it's going to be a 5 candle cluster. So we're looking effectively at this week's candle. This is the 5th candle in the pattern. And we've only got one condition here. We need condition 2. We need to get above the reference candle's high. That's this green horizontal. And then we'll only know at the end of the week if you've got condition 3. What's condition 3? Condition 3 is closing above it. If we close above this green horizontal, then I think we're starting to attack the resistance area. So this is sort of the finicky details. This is the minutiae. We've looked at the exponential moving average, which is below price and moving in that upwards direction. We've looked at the oscillator, which is above 50. Now we're looking at the price action, the actual granular details. And because it's a weekly chart, we're only going to know at the end of the week whether we're going to get the third condition, the second and the third condition, I beg your pardon. It's an important week. We got tech earnings out this week. I think we got Amazon, we got Meta. I think Apple might be coming out, subject to correction. I know Microsoft and Meta are coming out. I think Apple is as well. So we're going to have some real sentiment shifts in the market, which may affect DAX. What is really interesting is when we take a look at the oil chart. Let's go through to the UK oil chart. which is our proxy for Brent. And this is an analysis I did a couple of weeks back. And look at candle 1 here. Okay, candle 1 is the reference candle. It's got the lowest low amongst 3 candles. Theoretically, the HT candle does as well, but sort of the more you look at it, the more used to the candle or the candle pattern you get used to. And I like to use this candle as the reference. Once we've got candle 1, take a look at candle 2. Candle 2 is condition 2 and 3. Okay, it moves above the reference candle's high, closes above it. And what is interesting here is I'm combining this with peak and trough analysis. Reference trough, reference peak, higher trough, and now off the higher trough we're starting to get the reference candle. Now the swing started. And we're looking to see if we can get past the reference peak. If we get past that reference peak, oil moves into uptrend. You can see something interesting here in terms of the moving average. Prices crossed above the moving average. Okay, so that's bullish, but the moving average is yet to turn up. We want to see that moving average turn up as well. That's an extra check in the box. Okay, take a look at the RSI. It's popped above 50, so the underlying momentum has tilted towards the bullish side. So this is a nice example of a reference candle reversal. Let's just cement this by going back to the DAX and just keeping an eye on what we want to look at. We want to look at if we get above and close above the reference candle's high. Good question from Raj. Is the weekly chart the most significant to confirm the reference candle setup? The higher the time frame, certainly the more significant the signal. So the weekly time frame certainly will have a very big emphasis on reference candles reversals. If you can get a reference candle reversal on a weekly, I think that is more powerful than a reference candle reversal on a daily, which is more powerful than a reference candle reversal on the 4-hourly, etc. Because if you go down to say the 15-minute or the 5-minute chart, Raj, well, there you're so close to the tick, it's going to be very volatile, very erratic, and I think they're going to have less potency. Does that answer your question, Raj? Of course, if you get a reference candle reversal on a monthly, that would be even more powerful. Okay, so you can see here, where's the reference candle here? It's right over here. Okay, there's your reference candle. There's the completion of it. We're looking at a monthly chart now. So a really big tick up there. Okay, let's go back to the weekly here. So I think that DAX is one that is on the watch list for the time being, and it's just a really interesting unfolding of price action as we examine it. Let's take a look at a few of the other instruments that are important, and of course we're going to start off with the US dollar. We must mention the US dollar in our analysis because the US dollar is, in my opinion, the first link in a chain. And we're not really going to go into the mechanics or the 3 conditions of the bearish reference candle, but you can see reference candle to the downside here, reference candle to the downside here, completed. These are the last reference candles to the downside on the greenback. What would be interesting, Mia is just asking, what's the EMA I use in the weekly? I'm using a 30-week, Mia, just to let you know where that comes from. I'm just using it because it was in a book and I'm going to not get this title completely correct, but the author I'll get correct. The author's name's Stan Weinstein. I think it was written in '87. It's a book that stood the test of time. It's called How to Profit in a Bull and a Bear Market, and he uses a 30-week. There was another influential trader who used a similar methodology, and that person was an Australian named Neil Costa. Neil used a 34-week. Okay, so just to let you know, methodologies were similar. Kim makes a very good point. So listen to this. Kim writes, but Forex is so influenced by news, so the reference candle can be knocked out. Well, the answer to that is yes, of course. The reference, so this is the rules with reference candles, Kim. All swings are going to start with reference candles, but not all reference candles are going to lead to swings, and that can be potentially because they get knocked out by news, right? The higher the time frame, the less likely they're going to be knocked out by news. Generally, the weekly, the monthly trends tend to follow fundamentals. It's not to say that, of course, they can't be knocked out by news, but I would suggest the news has to be quite severe to have a huge effect on a monthly, huge effect on a weekly. Certainly, as we get to the lower time frames, the daily, the 4-hourly, we're getting more susceptible to whipsaw signals. What I want to show you on the dollar, just let me know if that helps you, Kim. So we've got a bearish reference candle here, okay? We've got a bearish reference candle here, okay? Well, look over here. Now, again, I don't know the price action. I don't know how this price action is going to unfold. Nobody knows how price action is going to unfold because nobody can tell the future, right? But what we do say in technical analysis is that the trend is your friend. So trends tend to persist once they form. So I just wonder if we're going to get a third reference candle to the downside, another lower peak over here. Wouldn't that be fascinating? So the way that would work is we would have to wait until the end of next week, to see if we get a downwards push in the US dollar. That would be the next lower peak in the series. It might not work. It might not work out that way. We might still get some pullback in the US dollar. That's a real possibility, and we discussed that yesterday, in that it can certainly move higher if there's a pullback on those risk markets. If there's a pullback on those risk markets, money will tend to flow to the safe havens. Well, the dollar's a safe haven, okay? And we've got a very important week of news, as Kim said. The news is important. News can shift price action radically depending on how the earnings come out. We've got big earnings this week, so on the tech side. So we want to just be cognizant of that. But it does look as if we've got potentially a condition 1 year. And I'm only saying potentially because we've only got 2 out of 3 candles. We don't have the third candle. So I'm being very premature in my assessment there. Okay, so you can see US dollar potentially setting up for the next lower peak. What if US dollar setting up for the next peak? We must also, of course, mention the news. We're getting the Federal Open Market Committee going to hike by 25 basis points tomorrow. Is it going to be a dovish hike? We can bring up euro because on Thursday we're going to get the ECB. Okay, well, the ECB I believe is going to be more hawkish than the Fed, even though the European PMIs, which are frontline data, were very poor yesterday. But here's the potential. Here's the potential first. Here's the potential first signal. Then, of course, we need price to take out the high of the reference candle and to close above the reference candle. Okay, so you can see the reference candles, I think, on a weekly chart are very, very useful for us. especially in trending moves, because it helps us pick the dips in the uptrend. It helps us pick the rallies in the downtrend. So that's something that we're going to mention again and again and again. It's a very useful part of our arsenal, a very useful tool as part of our arsenal. All right, I think that's as far as we'll go this morning. If there's any other questions, please go ahead and type us in. Thank you very much, Raj, much appreciated. All right, let us wrap up here, guys. I don't see any questions coming in. I want to wish you guys good day, good evening ahead. Tomorrow we will include an extra webinar, which will be the Crypto Minute. Thanks very much, guys.